The streets of Birmingham, England, packed today with fans who wanted to say their goodbyes to Ozzy Osbourne.
I'm dying. It's a fact. There's no need for a doctor to tell me. That farewell performance was something I insisted on doing. I don't want to disappear silently. I have to say goodbye in person.
Jean Osbourne, Ozzy's sister, stepped into the room. Age had slowed her movements, but it had not diminished the weight of her presence. She knelt beside her brother, tears spilling freely, and whispered into the stillness, "Oh, John, my little brother, you've gone too soon, and yet you were ready in ways none of us could ever be." She kissed his forehead and held his hand, feeling the last traces of warmth leave his skin. And in that moment, Sharon understood the depth of grief that could not be measured by words. It was a grief that encompassed decades of shared childhood, rebellious teenage years, the early struggles with music, fame, and addiction, and finally the private, tender moments that only a family could witness. Jean spoke of the boy from Aston, Birmingham, the mischievous, tender-hearted child who would sneak records out of shops and dream loudly of a life in music. She recalled evenings when he made everyone laugh with absurd antics, when his mistakes were always forgiven because of the love that never wavered. In her voice, Sharon heard the echo of all the years Ozzy had lived not just as a public figure, but as a brother, son, father, and friend. Sharon's own memories surged in waves, unstoppable and relentless. She thought of the chaotic early years of their marriage, the nights spent in hospital rooms during Ozzy's health scares, the fights and reconciliations, the moments of heartbreak, and the relentless humor that had always bound them together. She remembered the way he held her during storms she had never been able to weather alone, how he could make her laugh when she was convinced laughter was impossible. The children, each in their own way, mirrored the grief Sharon felt. Jack, pragmatic yet vulnerable, moved around the house as if carrying its weight alone, attempting to structure the chaos. Kelly, expressive and emotional, sought out connection and comfort in memories and music, creating her own private rituals of mourning. Amy, quiet and introspective, processed grief internally, a testament to her lifelong preference for privacy, yet unwilling to be absent when the family needed unity. Sharon felt each of their losses as though it were hers multiplied, a shared heartbeat of sorrow that resonated through rooms, the walls, the very air itself. The funeral preparations became a lifeline, however tenuous. Sharon poured herself into them, ensuring that everything reflected both the legend and the man. Black Sabbath classics that had defined eras and quieter, intimate songs that had played in their home, flowers chosen not for grandeur but for the personal significance Ozzy had expressed in the past, and a program that balanced professionalism with the genuine warmth of their family life. She worked closely with Jean and Jillian, Ozzy's other sister, incorporating stories from their childhood into the eulogy. These weren't tales of the world, but for the family, for anyone who understood that even the most chaotic, larger-than-life person has a tender, irreducible core. They spoke of shared pranks, small victories, the boy who climbed too high, the man who never stopped dreaming, and the heart that had loved fiercely, imperfectly, but unwaveringly. When the day arrived, the streets of Birmingham were flooded with fans, the air thick with grief, admiration, and nostalgia. The hearse moved slowly past the Black Sabbath bridge, past crowds holding signs, albums, and flowers. Sharon held on to Kelly and Jack, Amy walking close behind, all of them acutely aware of the dual realities, the public mourning and their private devastation. Jean and Jillian stood near the front, faces etched with pain yet brimming with love, a reminder that familial grief carries a depth the world cannot quantify. Sharon watched as Jean addressed the crowd, sharing the stories of a boy named John, the man behind the myth, speaking of humor, kindness, and the love that had always been at the center of Ozzy's life. It was a reminder to everyone that behind the stage persona, the interviews, the headlines, was a human being whose life had touched those closest to him in ways that fame could never measure. After the funeral, the house returned to its painful stillness. Sharon moved through rooms once shared with laughter, music, and sometimes arguments, now haunted by silence. She found solace in keeping Ozzy's belongings as they were. His jackets draped over chairs, the half-finished crossword on the counter, the bottle of aftershave by the sink. Each item was a connection, a tangible proof of a life that had been lived fully, wildly, and with authenticity. Memories came unbidden. It began with the kind of silence that didn't just fill the room, but pressed against your chest. The ridiculous tea every breath felt deliberate. The dollhouse he had built every heartbeat seemed to echo in the hollow of the house. The small act Sharon Osbourne sat on the edge of the bed. Sharon understood grief in its totality. Her diamond ring unrelenting against her skin. Its moments of eyes fixed on the still form of the man who created both numbness and a strange, deepened sense of love. Ozzy was gone. The phone had already rung countless times, messages flooding in from friends, colleagues, fans, and journalists alike. But the room felt separate from the world outside. Here, there were no headlines or social media posts. Only a family grappling with a void so vast it seemed impossible to traverse. She could hear footsteps in the hall before they reached the room. Jack entered first, his face pale, jaw tight, eyes swollen from the suddenness of it. He moved carefully, almost reverently, to stand beside the bed, taking his father's hand in both of his. Sharon could see the tension in him, the rawness that grief had carved into his body in just hours. And she wanted to reach out, to tell him it was okay, but no words would fit. Kelly followed, her voice breaking almost immediately as she whispered her disbelief. She leaned over the bed, pressing her forehead to his chest, as if her presence could make the heart beneath it rise again. Amy, ever the quiet one, came last. Her usual composure had slipped somewhere between the phone call and the moment she reached the room, revealing a vulnerability that only such profound loss could strip away. The children adapted in their ways. Kelly sought solace in music, often performing quietly in her room, drawing on memories of her father's encouragement and his own unpolished harmonies. Jack focused on tangible tasks, organizing memorabilia, speaking to collaborators, ensuring his father's legacy would be preserved accurately. Amy, quieter and more reflective, handled grief through observation and support, always present but unobtrusive, absorbing the family's pain while giving space to each member's process. Sharon, meanwhile, leaned heavily on the sisters. Jean and Jillian called regularly, offering stories and comfort, bridging the past and the present in ways that reminded Sharon she was not alone in her mourning. They spoke of dreams, of childhood memories, of moments Ozzy had held close but never shared with the wider world. Sharon found in their voices a mix of solace and pain, a mirror to her own experience, and slowly she realized that grief was a shared architecture, one that could hold multiple hearts without breaking. Each evening, Sharon would retreat to the garden as the sun dipped below the horizon, the skies streaked with colors that mirrored her own tumultuous emotions. She would whisper into the air, as if Ozzy could still hear her, "I hope you know how loved you are." And in those moments, in the quiet of fading light, she believed he did. The children would come out, sometimes silently, sometimes speaking, sharing fragmented memories, small observations, or simply the need for presence. Kelly would hum old songs they had sung together. Jack would recount stories of backstage chaos and private victories. Amy would sit listening, sometimes offering a small observation that cut through the sadness with clarity. Sharon understood then that grief was not only sorrow but also memory, and memory carried the living essence of those who had gone. Weeks passed, then months. Sharon found herself slowly learning to navigate life without him, understanding that the absence would never feel ordinary, that the world had irrevocably shifted. She continued to honor him in the small, daily ways, leaving his favorite breakfast out on the counter, keeping the living room arranged as he would have wanted, speaking his name aloud when no one else was present. She spoke often with Jean and Jillian, their conversations forming a lifeline that tethered them to both the past and the present. They laughed about old pranks, cried over shared losses, and found solace in the undeniable truth that love, deeply lived, never really dies. Ozzy's influence extended beyond the family, through fans, collaborators, and the cultural touchstones he had created. But for Sharon, the legacy was intimate. It was in the echo of his laughter, the imprint of his hand in hers, the shared history that no headline could capture. Sharon recognized, too, that grief was a teacher, revealing resilience in ways life had never demanded before. She found herself stepping into roles she hadn't anticipated: protector of memory, curator of legacy, pillar for her children. Jack, Kelly, and Amy looked to her not only for comfort, but for guidance in navigating a world that had lost its central figure. And in the quietest moments, Sharon discovered a profound depth of human love, the way it could sustain, heal, and transform pain into a continuing tribute, a living memorial embedded in daily life. Even now, in the months following his death, Sharon's life remained intertwined with Ozzy's memory. Every object, every story, every shared laugh or tear was a thread connecting her to a man she had loved, the father of her children, and the brother to Jean and Jillian. And though the world continued to move on, a blur of headlines and remembrances, Sharon understood that true grief was timeless, expansive, and deeply personal. It was in quiet corners, in whispered names, in moments of unguarded emotion, and an enduring knowledge that love, real love, never truly ends. She would carry Ozzy's presence forward in the subtle, profound ways that mattered most. In her heart, in her family, and in the stories that would be told for generations to come. The boy from Aston, the rock legend, the man she had loved. He was gone, yes, but his essence remained in every note of music, every memory shared, every heartbeat of the family that had loved him beyond measure.